It's just, it's so good to see everyone. Um, I think the first thing I wanted to say is just, I'm so proud to be an alum, and a member of this group. I get all the updates that Ashley sends me. I look at the newsletter. I follow you on socials. Some of you are more entertaining than others. Um, but I just really, I'm just so proud, to be affiliated with you in this way. And I do just want to take a moment to thank Ashley Evans for her powerful work in building this community. Um, this was one of her ideas. And between her and Josh Harris and of course Tina Chen and Valerie Jarrett, we spend so much time reflecting on ways to, um, keep you engaged. This series was a way for you to hear updates on the Presidential Center. We've been in community in this space with our architects, Todd Williams and Billy Chen. You all gave me a opportunity to be with Maya Lin, who of course is one of the most, sort of iconic architects and artists of our time. We had a chance to take a look at the water garden that you all are creating, to honor Barack Obama's mother, Ann Dunham. I mean, we could just stop right there because that is just glorious and so cool. But we've done more. We went through the virtual fly through videos with our creative director, Hash, and it's just so much that Hash has given to this organization and to this work. So I'll remember that fondly. You all took one of the first looks at home court, first looks at the interior spaces. So, and this all came, the idea came from Ashley, but the content comes from you. So knowing what you want to hear about is so important to us. But today we're going to spend some time introducing you to something that you all are a part of, and that's the Obama Leadership Network. But this is a group of um, more than 1,000 alumni of the Obama Foundation's leadership programs, and they are around the world. And the reason why I say you all are part of this is because so many of you have responded to our call to ask you to become mentors to our college students who are in our leadership network, our Voyagers, mentors to our scholars who are in these degree programs. And, they look up to you so much because so much of what they are inspired by are the things that you were a part of creating. And, they get time to spend with President and Mrs. Obama. That's cool. Maybe they'll let me chime in. But you are, I think there's just a connection to you all that's special. I think they see themselves in you, and my hope is that you'll see yourselves in them. So thank you for that, because that is how the legacy lives on. So as usual, we will take your questions. Hopefully, as you'll see, I'm not going to spend most of the time talking, so we may actually have time for questions. But if we don't get to yours, we're going to also always reply by email or decide that we want to bring that question into a future event. Just the last thing I want to say, just because I'm not unaware of what's going on, particularly in the country right now, and I'm sitting here in Chicago. I just want to make sure you all are clear on one thing that is important to President Obama. As you know, because of your time with him, he is always very clear on his ethical and legal lines, and he draws bright lines. and he stays on one side of him. I think we just had the anniversary of the tan suit moment. That was a moment because he stays on the right line of things. And one line that he has insisted upon for the Obama Foundation is that we are not a partisan or political organization. We don't get involved in partisan or political activity. And so there are all kinds of ways for you all to do that. And I'm sure you'll find ways to do that, but that's not what we do. And that comes from the top. And being nonpartisan and non-political, frankly, has allowed us to, I think, build a particular legacy around leadership development, civic engagement, and the Obama Presidential Center. And so I just wanted to share that because that's a really important line. So with that, let's get into it. Just, MJ, Ashley, this is awesome. And we get a chance to, because of you, connect these two communities, 44 alumni and our newer program alumni. So Nada, are you with us? Are you in the house?
I am. Let's see if my camera's coming on. Yes, so good to
Hey.
see you, Strat, and so good to be here. Thanks.
Thank you for doing this. So let me brag about you for a second, and I'm gonna make you stay on camera for this just because I want to see your face, see how you take it. So we had this idea that we wanted to treat our alumni of our leadership development programs in a way that would enhance everything that they had learned and were learning through their participation in the Obama Foundation programs. As you can imagine, these are incredibly competitive programs. And so the people who end up in them are special. And so Nada has joined as our global network lead and has built something out of whole cloth. She leads our engagement with, as I said, over 1,000 alumni of our program around the world. We're adding a few hundred every year to her list. And she comes to us after having really fostered global networks of democracy focused nonprofits. And those networks allowed those democracy nonprofits to work together. She's supported activists before. She's supported activists in the Middle East during and after the Arab Spring movements. I was in the White House during that, so I remember that time. And then she led the Open Gov Hub, a network that just focused on these open government reforms. So everything that I described about President Obama's values of transparency and building trust in institutions are things that Nada brings to this work as well. So I can't think of anybody better suited to play this role. And so far, frankly, Nada, you've been kicking ass. And I'm really excited for this group of alumni to get a chance. I know you're going to spend a lot of time with our leaders, but I also am excited that they get to know you as well. So with that, I'm gonna turn this over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Strat. I think I'm only blushing a little bit, but I really appreciate that kind introduction. And honestly, conversations like this are something that I've been looking forward to so much since I joined the foundation 2 years ago as the first global network lead. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself and then tell you about this amazing community before we bring up our panelists. So like Strat mentioned, when I started my own career more than a decade ago, I'll never forget these early moments that showed me just the power of peer relationships and how these relationships are so essential for all of us to keep building the futures that we seek. I remember one of the first workshops that I organized was with activists from across the Middle East in the wake of the Arab Spring movements. And, we had developed so much beautiful content and curriculum for them. But at the end of these 3 days together, the number one message we heard was thank you. We were thirsty for these connections. And so that message continues to resonate with me in my own work, just trying to build social capital and make it as easy as possible for amazing leaders to know that they're not alone and to do their amazing work with a community of support behind them. And so, of course, all of you as alumni of the Obama administration and the campaigns, You were part of making history, and you have also passed the baton to this next generation of leaders who are part of our foundation leadership programs. So really, it's such an honor to be connecting you as two really, really special communities and alumni networks for the foundation. Let me give you a little bit of orientation to this amazing global community that's been growing since 2018 when the foundation started our leadership programs. So in that relatively short time, just a couple years, we have already graduated more than 20 cohorts of Obama leaders, scholars, fellows, and now Voyagers as well. That means there are more than 1,200 of these Obama leaders all around the world, in almost 150 countries as of today, with high concentrations in Africa, followed by Asia, the United States, and Europe. These leaders collectively are working on every single social change issue you can imagine, from democracy and climate change to health and women's rights and education and more. But really that through line is their commitment to values-based leadership, because we all know that it's not just what you do to make the world a better place, but it's really how you lead that matters. And so I'm so excited that we have three very special guests as part of the panel to really just give you a glimpse into the incredible young leaders that make up this global community. I'm now going to ask our three panelists to come to the virtual stage and turn on your cameras. And for each of you to just share kind of a 1 or 2 minute introduction, which program were you part of, and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're working on today. I'm going to ask Jean, one of our inaugural Leaders USA alumni at this point, to go ahead and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Netta. It's such an honor to be here with all of you today. I'm Jean Reidy. I was born and raised in the Chicagoland area, and other than a couple years away for school, I have been here my whole life. My parents are from the south side of Chicago. We are proud White Sox fans, even in a historically bad baseball year such as this. And when I was 13 years old, I decided that I wanted to become a nurse. And I have spent all my time since then working towards and in that career and caring for patients around the Chicagoland area. So currently, I am a nurse practitioner and the Senior Medical Director and Vice President of Advanced Practice Providers and Clinical Fellowships at Oak Street Health, which is a national primary care company for seniors focused on providing measurably better health for communities that have typically been significantly under-resourced when it comes to healthcare. And prior to that, I spent 10 years working at Erie Family Health Centers, which is a network of federally qualified health centers here in Chicago, and spent several years working night shift in the Cook County Hospital Emergency Department. And my focus and my passion is really about advancing health equity by training the next generation of the primary care workforce to ensure that everyone has access to the necessary preventative and chronic disease services that they need to live their healthiest lives. So I am deeply proud to say I'm a member of the inaugural Obama Leaders USA program, which occurred in the second half of last year. And I love to see some of my colleagues from that cohort on this call, and really excited for this talk today. Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much, Jean. Let's turn to Liza next, one of our inaugural Voyagers who have also just the first cohort that has just graduated. So go ahead, Liza.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liza Zaruba. Thank you so much for having me on this phone call today. I can very much tell you that before I joined the Voyager program, opportunities like this were something that I would have never dreamed of. So I feel very honored to be here today. So I am from a little small town in Nebraska called Columbus. It's about 90 miles away from Omaha. Which is where I went to university over at Creighton University. I just graduated in May with a degree in health administration and policy, while also studying public and global health. And that's where a lot of my passions sit in as well. I grew up with parents who were both clinicians, specifically in rural America. And so I saw a lot of the accessibility issues from a very early age. And that's kind of what's driven a lot of the work that I have done since. And so For my voyage last summer now, I traveled to Togo and I was working with some local nonprofits there on some implementation of resource distributions to build up the infrastructure to create operating rooms that would be able to facilitate C-sections within rural communities. So I did that for a few weeks, and then after leaving Togo, I moved over to Geneva, Switzerland, where I was working for UNITAID, which is a partner of the World Health Organization. And there I was also working on accessibility issues, but in particular to intellectual property rights issues and access to medicine. So that was on a much higher scale, where I was working on different patent barriers, trade flexibilities, those kinds of things. Which I've absolutely adored and loved. But since graduating this year now, I'm trying to get a little bit more of that on the ground experience. So I'm over here in Chicago now. I've been here for exactly a month, which has been really great. I love it so far. And I'm working for Erie Family Health Centers, which Jean used to work at actually. So a little bit of a connection there. And I'm working as a health educator this year with patients to work on lifestyle management modifications before heading to Johns Hopkins for graduate school next year.
Thank you so much, Liza. So happy to have you on behalf of the Voyagers cohort, our youngest leaders in this network. And I'm going to ask Rebecca, last but not least, to introduce herself. Rebecca wears a couple different hats connected to the foundation these days, so please go ahead and share.
Thanks, Netta, and thank you everyone for having me. My name is Rebecca Silverman, and I'm currently the Public Engagement and External Affairs Coordinator at the Obama Foundation, and a former scholar. So I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Go Badgers, if we have any Badgers on here. After college, I was a teacher on the southwest side of Chicago, where I taught elementary school for 3 years. And while I was teaching, I became really passionate about literacy and reading. I would research the best methods to teach my students, and I would buy new curriculum for them. And as most teachers do, I became frustrated with having to advocate for my students to receive things that I believed was their right. And so after 3 years, I decided to go back to school to pursue my dual master's degree in public policy and social work to advocate for them at a higher level. My last year of teaching was a 2019-2020 school year, and when the pandemic started in March, we didn't really know what to do or how to teach our students. So I just decided to start dropping off books at their homes, because I recognized throughout the school year that there was a need there, that a lot of my students didn't have books at their homes. And so after talking about what I was doing with a teacher friend of mine from the school, we started talking about what would it look like if we delivered books on a community level instead of just this household level. So in 2020, we started collecting books and monetary donations and passing them out in Roseland, where she was from, which is on the south side of Chicago. We would make bags full of books and put them in people's cars. When they stopped at a red light, we would pile them onto buses, and we would stop families walking by, just making sure we were getting books out. And over the course of 3 years, we handed out 10,000 books to the Roseland community, which were new and gently used, all culturally representative books for people to have ownership. And at the time, I was getting my master's at the University of Chicago. So I was very proud that my work led to be selected as an Obama Scholar in 2022. And although my initial interest in the work was around literacy access, the work we were doing was essentially community organizing. And we all know someone here that was a community organizer in Roseland. But my interest in engagement now brought me to my position today at the foundation, where I support internal operations and strategy for the public engagement and external affairs teams. So thank you all. Happy to be here.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. So I get to talk with leaders like Rebecca, Liza, and Jean every day, which is such a huge part of why I love my job so much. So I hope everyone in the audience gets to enjoy a taste of that today. And we're so lucky to have you all here. And, as a reminder, kind of the theme that we want to explore together today is this whole concept of bringing change home. How are each of you really bringing change home for different communities, and really bringing these core leadership values to life? So I'm going to ask a series of questions, and I'm excited for our conversation over the next 20 minutes or so, before we hope to take some questions at the end, and hopefully walk away feeling very inspired, empowered, and connected through today's discussion. Before we get into the first question, just for those who might not have seen this, we recently published actually on obama.org our 10 Hope to Action values, which really represent the foundation of our leadership programs these days. We can go ahead and share in the chat, I think, a link to that in a minute. You can actually find it on our careers page. But I just want to give a nod to that because it really does anchor everything that we do in our leadership programs, whether it's with the scholars, the leaders, the Voyagers these days. You know, we're always talking about values-based leadership and how that is the through line that really embodies and represents the leadership character and legacy of the Obamas. So that leads me to my first question for each of you, which is, knowing that values-based leadership is this cross-cutting theme for all of us in this network, you know, what does that actually mean for you in practice these days? And what in particular would you say are a couple of the core personal values that you really try to lead by in this particular chapter of your life?
I can kick us off. You know, when I think about values-based leadership, I think a lot about servant leadership, if we are kind of familiar with that. And the idea is this idea of kind of like taking a step back and placing others in the limelight. And, you know, I think about this program and what a platform it has given me to be able to kind of share my story and to pursue the things that I would have never had the opportunity to otherwise do. And so to be able to kind of bring home my experiences, and be able to kind of pass that baton and pass that platform on to others. I think values-based leadership really goes back to looking at what should be done and not necessarily always the pragmatic what can be done. Because I think when you have that more optimistic lens on hope and place others in directing that, it pushes a form of change that I think is much more inclusive and brings about something that isn't self-centered or self-focused, but really outward looking towards other people.
Yeah, I agree, Liza. I think that inclusivity piece really struck out to me as well. You know, one of my, I have so many phrases from my time in the Obama Leaders USA program that I still reference and think about all the time. But one of them, you know, is around the notion that the most powerful word in creating change is we. And really that the work of values-based leadership is about creating change together and making sure that all the right voices and stakeholders are involved. And it's really this notion of calling us to this like higher purpose of change. And that just so deeply resonated. It was like finding the vocab and the framework to talk about sort of how I've always felt personally and how I've guided my career. It felt like doing the program really helped me expand my skill set within that, but also understand, you know, my role in this broader we and the greater we. And I think, you know, it really, one of my favorite aspects of the Leaders USA program was the content around building diverse coalitions and how critically important it is to do that. And it's such a key element of my work, both on the micro and macro level, whether that's building a coalition with a patient in an exam room about figuring out the next steps for their health, or in my leadership role in my company around ensuring that we have the right talent and the right providers and the right representation so that patients feel seen and heard when they enter our clinics. And so the inclusivity and the courage to do change is really some of the values that have stuck out to me and really so deeply resonated with my own personal core values that it felt like a total no-brainer to apply for the program and really just help further develop that over my course in the Obama Leaders USA program.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about what Netta said earlier with, you know, not what you do, but how you do it. And I think, you know, on a daily basis, hope and empathy are the values that drive me. But, you know, through this conversation and thinking back on my career and where I am today, I'm thinking a lot about integrity, the value of integrity. Is, you know, how I believe how I got to this position today, you know, through the work that I was doing before with the community book program. My co-founder and I, established an LLC and a nonprofit, and we had plans to open a bookstore. But last year, we had a disagreement, and I found out that my co-founder was not really being transparent with decisions that were being made. And so it was a very difficult decision, but, I decided to step away from the organization because it was moving in a way that was no longer aligned with my values. And so I actually, through talking with a lot of people, some of the people who are I see on this call today, I got a lot of support from my network and through the Obama Foundation and other networks as well. And it's funny, the advice I got a lot was a quote from Ronald Reagan, actually, which was trust but verify. And I think about that a lot today. And it was a difficult situation, but I really appreciate that I was able to have that like growth and learning experience early into my career.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I hope as we're listening to, for those of us in the room, this encourages you to reflect on your own values, because it's not often a question that we think about in our everyday lives, but especially, like you said, Rebecca, especially in moments of unexpected challenge or transition or even crisis, it's really helps guide us in the way that we lead. Okay, so we're going to move to the next question. One of my favorite questions to ask all of you as program alumni, which is, how have you changed since you first connected with the Obama Foundation?
I can go again. So, I gained so much knowledge from like the workshops and the guest speakers that we had and everything, but I'm sure Jean and Liza can relate to this, that the most impactful thing for me was the relationships I made in my cohort. And I think that the biggest actual change from these relationships that I had was a mindset shift to think from more of a global perspective, which I've shared with Netta before. I really didn't appreciate how like, US-centric my thinking was until this program. And I learned, just how interconnected we all are. And, we each were so passionate about the work that we were doing. And I found that the work that I was doing impacted everyone else as well, and how they were interconnected. So, for example, I had people in my cohort advocating for migrant voting rights in Ireland, and people, gaining agricultural skills in Uganda, or gender-based violence in Bangladesh, and effective reentry right here in Chicago. And all of those are directly related to the ability to read. And so we discussed, how having this basic foundational reading can affect all of these areas. And so that's how we were able to, grow these relationships around our areas of passion. But I think this idea of a global perspective has helped my work in the foundation today, which I think is really important, because we're, the Presidential Center will be opening in Chicago, but it will be a global institution.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, Rebecca. I mean, one of the main reasons I applied for the Obama Leaders USA was because I felt like my network had really shrunk or been siloed to only healthcare. And I knew that there were folks working on change in other areas that had all these valuable lessons that I could learn, and that I could share what I had learned. And it really delivered on that in like so many more ways than I really ever dreamed of. Both from learning from folks in tech, in education, in advocacy, in legal work, really just expanded my horizon. And the group really, I think, did an incredible job of calling folks in and really talking about how language affects folks from different perspectives. And so I'm much more thoughtful about the words that I use, both personally and professionally, because of my experiences with my colleagues in Leaders USA, because folks did a really nice job of sort of saying how our words were affecting them and their experiences. And I think about my colleagues when I am speaking now because of that. But it's also such an awesome community of support. Our WhatsApp group is active every single day, and it's such an awesome group, whether You know, you had a rough day and you need a pick me up, there's there for support, but there's also so much support of each other, you know, shouting out when people receive grants or get promotions. It's just so nice to have that. And I'm so impressed with how it's continued even after we stopped meeting weekly at the end of last year. Because change work is really hard and it's really lonely. And so having that built-in network has been so impactful. And I think professionally, my biggest change is really one of the key takeaways for me from my time with the Obama Foundation was that the messenger is often more important than the message itself. And so I've spent a lot of time professionally trying to understand, like, maybe I'm not the right messenger for what this message is or what I'm trying to get across, and how do I engage the right folks and make sure that both the messenger and the message are aligned to make the deepest impact. And that has made me really much more effective in being able to move forward the progress and change that I've been working towards in healthcare.
Yeah, I can completely relate to everything Rebecca and Jean is saying about the relationships aspect. I think that this program, particularly the Voyager program, it's so based in this idea of like building bridges and kind of pulling us out of the classroom and just our books and getting us to connect with people firsthand. You know, before I was in this program, I'd pretty much only been in Nebraska my whole life. And I'd grown up in a very homogenous small community. And so I really only had firsthand perspective of those experiences. And so I really can't even fully put into words what a difference flying to somewhere like Togo, Africa is, to be able to sit down and eat a meal with people and hear about what their life is like. It changes your perspective entirely. And I think it humanizes so many of these issues, that it's not about the numbers or the statistics or kind of the logistics of all of this, but just like the relational aspect of how you can make change and make change from all levels. I think too, like before this program, when I thought of change, I thought of it much as like this pedestal of the 5 most powerful people in the world pulling these levers and making things happen. But really, there's so much on the ground work that's making incredible impacts. And so I think I've been able to see myself in so many different facets of that, and being able to imagine yourself as, you know, just a piece in the larger grand scheme of all of it. And it takes the pressure off a little bit of feeling this need to like be the person that changes the world, you know, because the world's not going to change overnight, and it's not going to change because of one person. I think this program has created relationships to make you feel like you're a part of something bigger than yourself. And it's been so inspiring. And so I think rejuvenating, you know, when the work can get hard and burnout is really a hard thing. It helps you kind of stay refreshed in the work and keep looking towards what's forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, a phrase that we often use on our team in the Obama Leadership Network, you know, program is we over me, as another way to kind of extend what each of you are talking about. You know, how can we uplift those leaders who are naturally thinking about, you know, what's the good of the whole, and what are the ways that we connect across our differences around our common values. So it's really beautiful to hear that. And also to hear each of you speak about the ways in which the relationships with your peers have been supportive, because we really think that those lifelong relationships and friendships are such a worthwhile investment. And sometimes I like to joke that, you know, if we did nothing else but kind of get you guys in the room and lock the door, like great things would happen. So that helps me avoid some stress when the work feels overwhelming. But we've talked a little bit about, you know, your relationships as leaders through foundation programs. But my next question is to pivot a little bit to reflect on the communities that you serve. And one of the beautiful connections in this particular panel discussion, right, is that each of you have a connection to Chicago, and you're really bringing change home to communities within Chicago, which of course is the location of the future home of the Obama Presidential Center, which has been the theme of previous webinars. So tell us a little bit more about, like, who are your people these days? Which communities do you feel most accountable to? Since accountability is one of those core 10 Hope to Action values. And maybe an example of, you know, how are you trying to bring change home to that particular community, whether it's in Chicago or beyond?
I can kick us off here. I really feel deeply accountable to my patients and always have. I think oftentimes when our physical or mental health is poor, it can be some of the most challenging moments in our life. And so if we don't have caring, compassionate providers to help us navigate that experience, it makes a really hard moment even more difficult. And so really trying to create trust in the healthcare system, which a lot of folks don't have through very understandable past experiences, really trying to sort of break the mold of what their experience of healthcare is. There's studies that show that patients decide when a provider walks in the room within 7 seconds whether or not they're trustworthy or not. And so it's a short time frame that we have to try and make a really big impact. And I really do my best to remain culturally competent and sensitive. And I serve a mostly Spanish-speaking community and have spent a lot of time developing my Spanish language skills so that I can have conversations and my patients can feel comfortable having those conversations in the language that they prefer. And so I have always loved being able to care for the communities within Chicago because it feels like giving back to this place that made me who I am, and that allows me to have a even just a small impact or improvement or positive experience on the city that really made me who I am is a deep pleasure and something I take really seriously. And the accountability towards my patients is something I feel every day and part of what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, I can very much echo that, Jean. I also be working for a family health center here in Chicago, so the accountability to patients is definitely top of mind for me. I feel like one of the biggest lessons that I learned when I was over in Geneva and Togo last summer during my voyage was the idea that dumping resources in a community is often not enough to be providing any effective help. So when we were showing up and we were distributing supplies, that was great. But when a community lacks the personnel, the infrastructure, the expertise, all of those other really necessary resources to be able to effectively implement all of that, it's a real issue. And so when I'm thinking about how I can best serve my patients, my job as a health educator is to help my patients with behavioral changes that are going to be able to facilitate better health. And so not just dumping mountains and mountains of information on them, but really sitting down and understanding the stories that they have and the barriers that they're experiencing right now. Like, why is movement a difficult thing for you? Why is nutrition something that, do we need to get you on food stamps? Do we need to get you connected with different resources? And really trying to create the support systems around my patients to be able for them to be effective at implementing those behavioral changes themselves. And I think that, going back to the whole idea of servant leadership, that is what like a patient-centered focus is, and definitely something that I'm focusing on this year.
I think in my role, just at the foundation on the public engagement team right now, as we move towards opening of the Presidential Center in just a few short years, we're really focusing on the neighborhoods that surround the Presidential Center. So that's Washington Park, South Shore, and Woodlawn. And so broadly, I'm supporting the work to make sure that the people that live in the neighborhood surrounding the Presidential Center feel seen and heard, and that they themselves feel that they're able to bring change home to their communities through the Presidential Center. But more specifically, I am still trying to advocate for students in the Chicago Public School District, across the district. And I'm able to help support that a little bit through my work. So the My Brother's Keeper Alliance through the foundation has milestones that all young men, they've determined young men need to succeed. And milestone 2 of that is reading at grade level by 3rd grade. So I know that the men that work at MBK are tired of hearing me talk about the statistics, and I show up at the office with books for them to bring to the schools. But I try to stay involved with that a little bit while I can. And we have a lot of great programs advocating for students in school, both through the My Brother's Keeper Alliance, as well as the Girls Opportunity Alliance, which advocates for women and girls in school all around the world. So I try to stay involved. And share that story with my networks. And then, just truly just trying to continue to change the narrative around students in our Chicago Public School District. We have amazing students that are resilient and capable, and I get to work with some of them through the Future Series, which is a program we have at the foundation with Hyde Park Academy, where we expose the students there to different career paths. We have different speakers every month, and so I'm excited. We're going to kick that off again soon for this school year, and it's just incredible to hear the questions that they have for the speakers, and just like watch their minds expand as they learn about new careers. And honestly, selfishly, I learn alongside with them. There's so many careers that I didn't even know about. And the Chicago Public School District is growing, and in terms of reading, we are close to the pre-pandemic numbers for reading levels. So it's positive, things are going the right way, but at the same time, the pre-pandemic levels were not great either. Just for your awareness, around 25% of third graders are reading on grade level in the Chicago Public School District. So we have a lot of room to grow. And in addition, adults in Chicago, about 1 in 4 are functionally illiterate, meaning they read below a 5th grade level. So we have a lot of room to grow, but the work that we do every day at the foundation, back to the values-based leadership brings me hope.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we'll just ask a couple more questions before we open it up for Q&A. So my next question for each of you is a little bit tricky, but hopefully you had some time to think about this. But I really just invite each of you to share with us one personal story, just a brief one, that somehow gives us a glimpse into why you do the work that you do. And I'm just going to add a little context here that, I get to, again, support a lot of program alumni and kind of remembering and reconnecting with those meaningful personal moments in our lives that shape our passions and that shape our dedication to servant leadership and to values-based leadership. So in the spirit of public narrative, for example, and other tools, storytelling tools that we share throughout our programs, give us a little glimpse through just one personal story. Not, we know we won't get the whole autobiography today, but one story that somehow helps us understand a little bit more where your commitment comes from for the work that you do and the way.
Yeah, I can start. So when I think about just my time growing up, I mean, I've only been out of my house now for about 4 years. So I think a lot about just my childhood. And my parents, like I mentioned earlier, they're both clinicians. And so most of my days were spent them coming home around 6 o'clock, and we would sit down and have a family dinner together. And I just kind of sit and listen to them talk about their days. And it felt so often like there was just time after time, then being so frustrated with the system. And I can remember a particular moment of my mom coming home, and she's an occupational therapist, and she was seeing a 2-year-old that day who had spina bifida, who had just been denied care by their insurance company, and they weren't going to pay it. My mom was really emotional about the whole thing, and was saying, we live in the United States of America, and yet this 2-year-old is never going to walk because the insurance companies won't cover it, and no family can afford to be paying $40,000 a year for care when they have 6 other children at home. And the more time that I've spent in this field, the more I've realized that story is really not unique. And as a 15, 16-year-old, that it's very impactful, and it made you kind of sit there and go, my parents, who are, in my mind, these heroes of the world, you can't do anything about it. It felt like kind of helpless. And so that really is what motivated me to want to move more into the systemic level of change and trying to fix a lot of these barriers that we can really only do from a higher systemic level.
Yeah, I can tag onto that a little bit. So When I was thinking about this question, I wanted to share a story about a patient that I cared for who had advanced dementia. And this was in the Portage Park neighborhood. And as I took care of her longer, I really felt her dementia had worsened to the point where she wasn't safe living alone. And I did everything within my power to try and get her into more supportive housing. But she obviously did not want to leave her home, which I really understand. But due to the current policies, as a nurse practitioner, I'm not able to declare someone unable to be safe at home. And I worked with Adult Protective Services in a variety of avenues, but unfortunately, she had a fire in her apartment and passed. And when you work in geriatrics, as I have done most of my career, loss and patient loss is a big part of it. And you learn how to navigate that. But this one hit me particularly hard because it was really a result of a policy that I was not able to make the decisions and the support for my patient that I thought were really necessary. And a big part of my work is working towards creating policies and professional cultures that allow all primary care providers to be able to provide the best care anywhere for patients. And I really look at this work as sort of my response to this patient's passing and a testament to her impact and really making it so that her memory lives on and that this change continues through really working to change some of these policies that don't reflect the current state of healthcare, which is that nurse practitioners are actually a huge percentage of the folks delivering care out there. And we want to make sure that the policies that we have are not causing harm to our patients, particularly some of the ones that are most vulnerable already.
So when I was teaching my last year of teaching, I taught special education for 4th grade. And I was the teacher that would push into the classroom, and I would be sitting in the back of the classroom with the handful of students that needed extra services, but would be walking around the classroom helping with everyone else. And throughout quickly into the year, I realized that my students, one, they didn't have learning disabilities. They just were not taught in the way that they needed beforehand, and were just passed along until 4th grade, where they didn't know how to read because they were not taught in the way that was right for them. And we have this phrase called diverse learners, which is a new phrase inside of special education. And we push back on that because everyone has diverse learning needs. Everyone learns in different ways, and reading isn't something inherent, which I think a lot of us take for granted, that it is very hard to learn how to read. And so I became interested in policy, and as Liza said, like advocating on a higher level for students, because just noticing that these students didn't need these extra services if they had gotten them in the first place. And on top of that, the rest of the class was at the same reading level that they were, because they too were not only getting the services when they were younger, but the students that I was serving, they had parents that advocated for them to get that extra support, where the rest of the class did not. And they were all essentially at the same reading level. And so just that inspired me to be interested in, pushing for, improving reading and literacy access at younger ages so that it doesn't exacerbate, because when students don't learn how to read in 3rd grade, you have to know how to read in order to take in the curriculum. You no longer get those skills in school. And so, when you don't learn those skills, you're more likely to be incarcerated or unemployed. And when you think about it, you need to be able to read to do everything. So, like Jean and Liza's work, you're not able to fill out forms at the doctor's office if you can't read. You can't do your taxes, a lot of things like that. And so just that experience and being with my students, I think about it a lot.
Thank you all so much. So my last question before we get to Q&A, and thanks everyone for the questions coming in, is simply, is there anything else you want to share to help give this wonderful audience a little bit more of a glimpse into what it's like to be an Obama Leader, Scholar, Voyager, In the room today, we have some of your fellow leaders, but of course, some alumni from the Obama administration and campaigns, and some of our foundation supporters as well, who helped make this all possible. So anything else that you want to share with them before we take some questions?
Yeah, I think in the first Leaders USA session, we appropriately talked about imposter syndrome, because I think all of us were feeling very overwhelmed about being selected for this honor and to be a part of this program. And, hearing the words like, you are now part of like the Obama's living legacy was so overwhelming and like sort of
No pressure.
unimaginable, right, at the moment. And so I think over the course of the last year, I've really moved from being terrified of that notion to really being so deeply honored and proud to be a part of this community. And I keep the work, like my work, deeply rooted in what I learned, and the community of support that I have gained through the Obama Foundation is really pushing me to just further expand my impact and to dream bigger. And it's still a high pressure thing, but it's I welcome it now and really feel so honored and proud to be a part of carrying on the legacy of President and Mrs. Obama.
I agree. And for the campaign alumni that are on the call, I was so inspired by the campaign in 2008 that I think back on that often as well. And my mom and I knocked on doors when I was in middle school, and it got me really interested in advocacy work. And so I really, appreciated the work that you all did. And I just echo what Jean said. It's just such an honor to be a part of this this network. And now being on the other side, I've just been meeting incredible people that work at the foundation, with Netta and MJ and Ashley that are all on the call, and of course Strat that was on the call earlier. There's just incredible people working at the foundation, and it's just another honor to be able to get to continue this work every day. And I should also say that I was talking to Ashley when I first started, and she was mentioning about the Voyagers that have the mentors from alumni. And it made me think that I would have loved to have had an alumni mentor when I was a scholar. So we started talking, and now I heard that the scholars do have alumni mentors now. So I'm so happy about that. And that's something that I definitely would have appreciated during my time.
Yeah, I can say as a Voyager who has experienced the alumni mentors, it's been absolutely an incredible honor. When Obama was first put into office, I was a first grader, for context. And so being like 6 years old, that really doesn't mean anything to you. But I can say getting to grow up in a democratic culture that is based in inclusivity and hope, and to have that be normalized is something that I think is really powerful for youth, and was very powerful for me, and made me genuinely feel like I had the power to make change myself. And now I think since being a part of this program, that has just been rejuvenated 100-fold. And having mentors like you to be able to just, sit down and have a 30-minute coffee chat, I think it has broadened my idea of what a career is, of what it means to make change. I can even speak for some of my peers in the program, like they have gotten full-time jobs with their mentors since being a part of the program. And so the impact you all have had on us does not go unseen, and has not been small in any way. And so I'm really thankful for the opportunity to be able to express my gratitude for all of it. You all have genuinely changed our lives in such meaningful ways, and I'm so appreciative.
So much. Okay, couple quick questions before we start to wrap. So what are 1 or 2 specific leadership skills that you've found to be most useful since your programs?
I can start. I think the biggest thing that's been so useful for me is trying to set aside my assumptions and my biases as much as possible, and not going into conversations feeling like I know everything beforehand, but going into a conversation and being able to say, I don't know, I have no idea, please tell me about it and tell me about the story that brought you there, has been eye-opening, very, very eye-opening.
And I'll add the power storytelling has been a big piece. I think we tend to go towards metrics and data, but actually some of the most compelling piece and what I find critical to my leadership journey is being able to tell the stories of the folks, and the putting human faces and stories behind the stats has been extremely helpful.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Liza said, I agree. And I also think that it's so important to not only to learn from other people, but just to be willing to unlearn things that, like when growing up, or beliefs that you have. It's a hard skill to have, but just that willingness and ability to unlearn, I have found to be very important.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. And I know Ashley does a great job to follow up with folks who shared questions that we didn't get to live. So please know that we'll follow up with you after the call as well. But another great question I'd love to wrap us up on is, what do you think is the most important thing that you've learned from each other, whether that was fellow cohort members during your programs or other program alumni?
I can start. I think the biggest thing that I've learned from my fellow peers is that change doesn't ever happen on your own terms. It doesn't happen in the timeline that you want it to. It doesn't necessarily happen in the exact most ideal way. But better is good. And that is something that President Obama has spoken time and time again, and has really, really stuck with me. And I think something that my peers in the Voyager program have really, really latched onto.
I found it really interesting that even hearing their stories today, that all the people I met in my cohort recognized a need and then responded to it. It wasn't anything that anyone had planned that they wanted to go do. Like for myself, I saw students, didn't have books in their homes, and so I brought them to them. And similar to Liza and Jean's stories, you just experience something and respond to it. So I think that can happen, and that in anyone's life in different ways. And if maybe it hasn't happened yet, it will. But that's where everyone's passion comes from, is these personal experiences where they recognized a need and just decided to do something about it.
Yeah, there's so many things that I learned that it's hard to pick just one, but I'll say one of the things I really learned a lot from my peers is the importance of community and self-care and resilience. I think I always thought about building my self-care and my resilience to continue change work as something I had to do by myself. And the Obama Leaders folks taught me on a consistent basis that sometimes that's a phone call to vent, sometimes it's, going for a walk. And that has really shaped how I take care of myself in order to be able to continue to do the work and make sure I'm not trying to pour from an empty cup. The Obama Leaders folks continue to be that community for me, and I know will for a long period of time.
Yeah, huge thank you, Jean. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Liza. One takeaway I'm getting from today is just the reminder that none of us succeed alone. And it's just such a privilege to get to spend time with you and the many, many others in this global community. For those in the audience, please tell us if you are interested for us to host more conversations with more of the amazing global leaders, more than 1,000 in the program alumni network. One of our leaders recently shared a quote I just want to end on quickly, which is, we have the power to move the needle and change the course of history when we come together. That was something that was so clear as part of the early days of the Obama campaigns and continues on in the living legacy that each of us here are part of. So with that, I want to give a huge thank you to Ashley and turn it over to Ashley to close us out. And thank you to the whole team that is behind today's event as well.
Hey, everybody, just if you'll give me one more minute of your time, I just want to pop on real quick and close us out. Many of you know me. I'm Ashley Evans, the Deputy Director of 44 Alumni Engagement. We're so grateful for this moment to bring together both our program and Obama Alumni Networks and a big group of donors who decided they could come out here and listen to us and hear about these programs. We're really, really grateful for all of your support. Thank you for joining this conversation. Thank you to Liza, Jean, Rebecca, Netta, and MJ, and for Mike to kick us off as usual. We received a bunch of cool questions from registration and the chat, and we would be happy to answer those after the fact. So please look forward to that. And one of the questions that we got from registration was, how can you get involved and get involved from afar? And you definitely can. As we've mentioned a couple times, thank you, Liza, for the pitch. We have a mentorship opportunity for our 44 alumni to mentor these amazing students. You probably saw this week our cohort announcement for the new Voyager students, and this is a really exciting chance for alumni to be paired with these students for mentorship calls and more. We'll offer a similar opportunity for our upcoming Obama scholars and the spring, and our US leaders as well. If you're in Chicago, we are always in the community, Rebecca knows, for events, and we'd love for you to join us. So just stay tuned to those emails, stay tuned to your spam folders. And if you're not seeing anything, just please reach out to us at 44alumni@obama.org, and we'd love to help. Finally, it's been such a pleasure to see the enduring impact and legacy of these networks. We can't wait to welcome you all to the South Side as we bring change home both next year and in 2026. We are continuing to work to offer tours of our site. So if you're in Chicago, send us an email. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.